Why are you crying? You knew this would happen eventually.
I can't do this.
They know you're here. They know about the baby. You have to leave now. 잘 처리했습니다.
You're pregnant. It wasn't a question. Sylvia's back hit the wall. Her heart stopped. Her mouth opened and nothing, absolutely nothing, came out. Kang Minho stood in the center of the room, jacket gone, the dark ink of his tattoos visible beneath his rolled sleeves, his eyes on her face like he was reading every lie she had ever told him in the last 4 months. How long? His voice was barely above a whisper. That was worse than shouting. Minho, how long? Sylvia. The silence between them was not empty. It was full, stuffed with everything she'd been hiding. Every morning she had pressed her hand to her stomach and told herself she would tell him tomorrow. Every night she had lain beside him and swallowed the words before they could reach her lips. 4 months, she finally whispered. He went completely still. Not the stillness of a man holding back, the stillness of a man deciding. And in 4 months of knowing Kang Minho, Sylvia had learned that his stillness was always more dangerous than another man's rage. 4 months, he said again. Soft, final, like a door closing on everything that came before it. Something crossed his face. She could not name it. It was not anger. It was deeper than anger. It was the face of a man who had just discovered that the one person he had let past every wall, every guard, every locked door, had been standing inside his chest holding a secret that could change the entire war. And the men who took you last night? His voice dropped to something dangerous and quiet and terrible. They knew before I did. Sylvia's blood went cold. What are you saying? He turned back around. His eyes found hers, and in them she saw something she had never seen on Kang Minho's face, in all the months she had known him. Fear. Not for himself. They weren't trying to scare you, Sylvia. His voice was barely a breath now. They were sent to make sure that baby never exists. The room tilted, and somewhere outside the window, in the dark belly of Seoul, a phone rang, and Minho looked at the screen and every last trace of emotion left his face like a light being switched off. He picked up the call, said nothing. Then, very quietly, tell my mother I am on my way. Wherever you are watching this, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far a story about a woman who hid a secret for 4 months, in a city that was not hers, from a man who turns out to be the most dangerous person in it, can travel. And if this story found you at a moment when you needed to be reminded that the truth always finds its way out, that it can surface in the quietest voice, in the stillest room, on the night you thought you had buried it deep enough, then you already know you cannot leave now. You just heard that call. You just watched his face go cold. You just heard him say, tell my mother I am on my way. And you do not know yet what that means for her, for the baby, for everything. Subscribe. Stay right here, because that call is about to change everything, and you need to see it for yourself. 4 months earlier, Lagos, Nigeria. The music was too loud and the champagne was too warm, and Sylvia Okoro was smiling so hard her face hurt. She was good at that, smiling when everything inside her was doing the opposite. She had learned it young, in a house where showing too much of yourself was treated like weakness, where her mother's highest praise was you handled that well, and her father's highest praise was you didn't cry. She had taken those lessons and built an entire personality around them. Sylvia who always looked put together. Sylvia who always had the right thing to say. Sylvia whose designs were sharp and precise because she poured every feeling she was not allowed to show directly into her work. Tonight she was wearing the dress she had made for this exact occasion. 3 months of quiet planning. Ivory silk cut on the bias. Hand-stitched details at the collar that had taken her 4 evenings and 1 very long weekend to finish. She had made it for her engagement party, with her own hands, because she was the kind of woman who believed the most important moments deserved something built with intention. She was 26 years old. She was about to get engaged. She was smiling so hard her face hurt. And somewhere in the back of her chest, a small, quiet voice had been trying to tell her something she kept refusing to hear. Emeka was late. Not 5 minutes late. Not Lagos traffic late. 45 minutes late to his own engagement party, in a room full of both their families, with his mother already on her second glass of wine watching Sylvia with that particular expression. The one that measured the distance between what her son deserved and what he had apparently settled for. Sylvia kept moving through the room, kept accepting congratulations for an engagement that had not technically happened yet, because the man who was supposed to be doing the engaging was nowhere. Her best friend Temi appeared at her elbow, fresh glass of water in hand, face carefully neutral. He called, Temi said quietly. And? He said 20 minutes. He said 20 minutes 30 minutes ago. I know. Sylvia took the water, looked around at the flowers she had arranged herself, the caterers she had briefed alone, the fairy lights she had hung because Emeka had said he was too busy that week, and she had said, fine, I will handle it. Because she always said, fine, I will handle it. Because she had spent 3 years handling everything and calling it love. I'm fine, she told Temi. Temi looked at her with 11 years of friendship in her eyes. I didn't ask. I know, I'm telling you anyway. Emeka arrived 45 minutes late, smelling of something she recognized without being able to name. He was pulled immediately into conversation with business associates near the back of the room, and she watched him across the space and felt that cold thing move through her. The same cold she'd been feeling for months and always found a way to explain away. She went to find him to say they needed to start. She pushed open the door to the small private room off the main hall, the one she had set aside for the ring, for the quiet moment before the announcement, the room she had put flowers in because she wanted it to be beautiful. And she stopped. Emeka, and a woman she did not know. And the way they pulled apart told her everything she needed to know about how long this had been happening and exactly how blind she had chosen to be. The silence lasted 4 seconds. It felt like 4 years. Then Emeka said her name. Sylvia. In that voice people use when they are not sorry for what they did, but very sorry they were caught. And something inside Sylvia went very, very quiet. Not sad. Not broken. Quiet in the way a decision is quiet. Final and clean and beyond argument. She turned around, walked back through the door, back through the party, through the room full of congratulations and fairy lights and warm champagne and his mother who had never thought she was enough, through the front door and into the Lagos night. She kept walking until the music could not reach her and the lights were just smears in the dark, and there was nothing around her but the city breathing its hot, indifferent breath, and her own footsteps on the pavement. She did not cry. She had been trained too well for that. She walked for 20 minutes. Then she stopped on a quiet street in Victoria Island and looked up at the sky, doing absolutely nothing useful above her. And she made a decision. She was done. Not just with Emeka, not just with this city, with all of it. The life she had been building inside someone else's plan. The way she had made herself smaller and more convenient year after year and called it compromise. She had a contact in Seoul, a fashion connection who had been offering a consulting opportunity for months. She had kept saying not yet because Emeka needed her here, because the timing was not right. The timing had just shown her exactly what it thought of her patience. She called from the back of an Uber, still in the ivory dress, still wearing the engagement smile like dried paint on her face. One word. When? 3 weeks later, she was on a plane. Seoul received her without ceremony. Incheon Airport was vast and cold and full of signs she could not read, and she stood in arrivals with her 2 suitcases and felt the full weight of what she had done settle on her all at once. The distance, the aloneness, the specific madness of leaving everything familiar for a city that did not know her name and had not asked for her. She picked up her suitcases and walked forward, because that was what she did. She found a small apartment in Mapogu, good light, thin walls, a landlady named Mrs. O, who communicated exclusively through gestures, and the kimchi she left outside Sylvia's door. Every Friday morning, without explanation or acknowledgement, Sylvia came to love that kimchi in a way that had nothing to do with food, and everything to do with the fact that it was the closest thing she had to someone checking she was still alive. She built a routine Early mornings at her work table sketching, afternoons at fabric suppliers in Dongdaemun, evenings learning the city street by street the way she had always learned things. Slowly, on foot, paying attention. She was productive in the way people are productive when they are running from something, completely and furiously and without pause. Because pausing meant feeling, and feeling meant the thing she had come 12,000 kilometers to outrun. She was exactly 2 weeks into this routine when Seoul showed her what kind of city it actually was. She was walking back from a fabric supplier on a Thursday afternoon, arms full of sample rolls, headphones in, navigating the narrow back streets of Dongdaemun by memory. She was thinking about a sleeve construction problem she had been turning over all morning. She was not paying attention to the men. That was her first mistake. 3 of them. Stepping out of a recessed doorway in a formation that was too deliberate to be accidental. The tallest one directly in her path. The other 2 flanking wide. One left, one right. Like they had done this before and knew exactly how a person's escape instincts worked. She registered them in the wrong order. First their stillness, then their positioning, then the specific quality of the tall one's attention. The way he was looking at her with the kind of focus that had nothing to do with attraction, and everything to do with a job he had been sent to do. Sylvia Okoro, the tall one said. She pulled one headphone out. Her fabric rolls shifted in her arms. Sorry? You are staying in Mapugu, said like a statement, like he already knew the answer. Every instinct she had fired simultaneously. She took one step backward. The man who had come up behind her, silent, she had not heard him at all, put a hand on her shoulder. Heavy, deliberate. Someone wants to meet you, the tall one said. His Korean accented English was unhurried. It does not need to be complicated. Let go of me. Her voice came out steady. Her heart was doing something violent. Let go of me right now. Ms. Okoro. I said let go. She dropped the fabric rolls and drove her elbow backward, hard, full force. The way her cousin had drilled into her in a Lagos self-defense class she had never expected to actually need, and connected with something solid. The man behind her made a sharp sound, and his grip broke, and she moved. Not running. Walking fast. Controlled, purposeful. The way you move when you know running confirms to everyone watching that you are afraid and alone. Her mind was already calculating. The fabric rolls were gone, her bag was on her shoulder. The subway entrance was 3 blocks. And she needed to get there without looking like she was getting there. She made it half a block. A hand closed around her wrist from a doorway and yanked her sideways, and she pulled in a breath to scream, "Stop, I am not with them." A different voice entirely, calm the way deep water is calm, still on the surface and completely unreadable underneath. She looked up, Korean, maybe 30, clean cut in an expensive dark coat, frameless glasses, the kind of composed, careful face that belonged in a courtroom rather than a doorway on a Dongdaemun side street. He had released her wrist the moment she stopped pulling. His hands were visible. He was not reaching for anything. Those men work for the John Syndicate, he said, quietly, quickly. They have been watching your building for 3 days. I don't know what they want with you yet, but you need to not be on this street right now. He glanced past her shoulder. They are regrouping. You have maybe 90 seconds. My name is Park Jae-won. Will you come with me? She looked at him. At the street behind her where the 3 men had reappeared at the end of the block. The tall one speaking into a phone. At this stranger with his careful hands and his specific urgency. How do I know you're not with them? She said. You don't, he said simply. But they had 4 of you, and I have only 2 hands, so if I wanted to take you somewhere you did not want to go, this would be a poor strategy. She almost laughed. Almost. Fine, she said. 90 seconds. He moved fast through 2 side streets and a covered walkway and into a small coffee shop that smelled of roasted barley and warm bread. He chose a table at the back facing the door and sat across from her and waited while she caught her breath. Then he said, precisely professionally, that the Jeon Syndicate was a criminal organization currently expanding aggressively through multiple districts of Seoul, and that if they had identified and flagged her specifically, she needed to understand she was not invisible in this city the way she might have assumed. Why would they flag me? She said. I arrived 6 weeks ago. I am a fashion designer. I know almost no one here. Jaewon looked at her carefully. Something moved behind his glasses, a thought he was choosing not to say out loud. Are you certain about that? No connections, no associations. No one you've met here who might have a complicated profile. She thought about it honestly. The networking events, the fabric suppliers, the relocation agency, Mrs. O and her Friday kimchi. Yes, she said. I am certain. He nodded slowly, not convinced. She could see that clearly. But he let it go and slid his card across the table. Clean white, Park Jae-won, senior prosecutor, a direct number, and told her to contact him immediately if anything else happened. Anything at all. He stood to leave, then paused. Are you all right? He asked. And it was not the professional version of the question. It was the real one, the one that actually wanted to know. I'm fine, she said automatically. He looked at her for a moment with something in his expression that was quiet and genuine and unexpected. You don't have to be Ta, he said, simply, like he meant it. Then he left. She sat in that coffee shop for a long time after he was gone, hands wrapped around a cup of barley tea that she was not drinking, thinking about 3 men in a doorway who knew her name and her address, thinking about a prosecutor who had been on that specific street at that specific moment, and whose file, if she could have seen it, already had her name written in it. She did not know that yet. She just sat and breathed and told herself she was fine. It was Temi who broke through the fine 3 days later. Midnight Lagos time, Sylvia's evening, the phone ringing while she was at her work table trying to solve the sleeve problem that now felt very small compared to everything else. He's telling people you had a breakdown, Temi said. The flatness in her voice carried its own particular fury. Emeka. He's been telling people, your people, Sylvia, people who know you, that you left because you couldn't handle the pressure, that you fell apart. Something moved through Sylvia that was not sadness and not grief. It was cleaner than that, hotter. Call him, she said. Her voice was perfectly level. Tell him I left because I chose to. Tell him there is a difference between a woman falling apart and a woman deciding she deserves better. Tell him I said he should learn that difference before the next woman has to teach it to him the expensive way. She hung up, went back to her work table, drew until 2 a.m. with something burning clean and clarifying in her chest. Not heartbreak anymore, not loss. Something closer to the feeling of finally putting down a weight she had been carrying so long. She had forgotten it was not part of her body. Freedom. Painful and real and entirely hers. 3 weeks after that, she went to the industry networking event in Itaewon because she was Sylvia Okoro and she did not let anything, not grief, not fear, not 3 men in a doorway, stop her from working. The event was held on a rooftop off the main strip. Heat lamps, expensive wine, the specific energy of ambitious people performing their ambitions at each other. She moved through it professionally, made 4 useful contacts, had 2 conversations that were genuinely interesting, and drank 3 glasses of wine because the 3rd glass arrived at exactly the moment she needed it to. She left at 11. The rain arrived at 10:30 and had absolutely no interest in warning anyone. She stood under the narrow entrance overhang, looking at the street being completely destroyed by rain, and accepted that she was about to be soaked. She was 3 steps into it when the black car pulled up. Long, expensive. The kind of car that had never in its entire existence done anything ordinary. The back window came down. Not a driver leaning across. Not an Uber she had called. Him. Sitting in the back himself. Not a passenger. Not someone being taken somewhere. Just a man who had a car that went where he decided and stopped when he said stop. Dark eyes under a brow that made everything he looked at feel like it was being assessed. Sharp jaw. The kind of face that had never needed to introduce itself because it arrived in any room before he did. He was looking at her. Not the way men on streets look at women. Not the fast inventory glance she had learned to ignore. He was looking at her, the way people look at something they have already decided is worth their full attention, and are in no hurry to stop. You're going to ruin that jacket, he said. Clean, precise English, with Korean underneath every word. Sylvia looked down at her cream jacket. Already spotted. Already beyond saving. "I know," she said. "Get in." Everything she knew about being a woman alone in a foreign city at 11 o'clock at night with rain coming down said no. Said walk away. Said you do not get into the cars of strangers no matter what their face looks like or how they look at you. She got in. Because she had been invisible for so long. Invisible to Amaka, who was supposed to see her most. Invisible in this city where no one knew her name. Invisible even to herself in the worst moments. And this man was looking at her like she was the only substantial thing on the street. And she had moved toward it before she made the decision. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. The suggestion of one. "Then we have time." He took her to a bar in Hanam-dong with no sign on the door. Just a heavy wooden entrance set into a stone wall, and inside, warm amber light and low music, and corner booths that felt like private rooms. The kind of place you only knew existed if someone who knew brought you. They sat across from each other. He ordered without looking at the menu. 2 glasses of something she did not recognize that turned out to be the most perfect thing she had tasted since arriving in Seoul. And for a moment neither of them spoke, and it was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who were actually paying attention to each other. "You're not from here," he said. "Lagos." She met his eyes across the table. "Nigeria. You?" "Seoul." His gaze moved over her face with that same deliberate attention. But not the Seoul most people see. She filed that away. She would understand it later. They talked. About the city and what it cost people who arrived in it from somewhere else. About her work. She mentioned she was a designer, and he asked questions that were more specific and more interested than she expected. Leaning forward with his forearms on the table, listening the way very few people listened. Like her words were the most important thing currently happening in the room. About loneliness, eventually, because the 3rd glass of wine had loosened something, and the booth felt like a confessional. "I left someone," she said, not planning to say it. He did not perform sympathy. He did not arrange his face into the correct expression and make the correct sounds. He just looked at her steadily. "Did he deserve you?" The question landed somewhere deep and precise. "No." The word came out quiet and certain. "But I kept trying to make him." "That's the most expensive thing a person can do," he said quietly. "Spend themselves on someone who keeps their hands in their pockets." She stared at him across the table. "Yes," she said softly. That is the most accurate thing anyone has ever said about it." He held her gaze, and something shifted in the space between them. Something that had been building since the car window, since the rain, since he had looked at her on the street like she was the only real thing in the city. And it shifted now into something neither of them was pretending not to feel. "What do you do?" she asked. "When you're not picking up women in the rain?" "I manage things," he said. "What kind of things?" His eyes moved over her face. The kind that don't have simple names. She should have pressed. She would understand later why she didn't. In that moment, in that amber light, with rain against the windows and his eyes on her face, the part of her that asked practical questions had gone very quiet. At 2 a.m, she said I should go. He said yes. Neither of them moved. He reached across the table slowly, completely slowly, giving her every moment to pull back, and his fingers covered hers, where her hand rested on the wood. Just that. Just his hand over hers. But her breath stopped, and the music went far away, and there was only the warmth of his hand, and his eyes, and the particular electricity of 2 people making a decision without saying a single word about it. "I don't know your name," she said. Her voice came out softer than she intended. "No," he agreed. "That should bother me more than it does." "Does it bother you?" She turned her hands slowly under his until their palms were touching, their fingers loosely laced. "Ask me in the morning," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, still holding her hand, and she stood too. And when he stepped toward her and raised his other hand to her face, his thumb at her jaw, fingers curved at her cheek, tilting her face up. She was already moving toward him. He kissed her slowly, like he had already decided there was no reason in the world to rush. His mouth was warm and certain, and completely unhurried. And when she reached up and gripped the front of his shirt, because her knees had made their own structural decision, she felt him almost smile against her lips and pull her closer. They left the bar at 2:30. In the dark of her apartment, he kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands in her hair and her back against the wall, and his mouth moving from her lips to her jaw to her neck and back again, like he was learning her by feel. She pulled at his shirt, and he made a low sound and brought her face back to his and kissed her until everything that had happened in Lagos, every cold, diminishing moment, every fine I will handle it, every night she had swallowed the feeling that something was wrong, all of it simply dissolved under his hands and his mouth, and the specific extraordinary feeling of someone choosing you without reservation. He touched her the way people touch things they do not want to break, deliberately, attentively, like she was worth full and complete focus, and he had already decided to give it. She pressed her fingers against the ink of his tattoos in the dark and felt him go still beneath her touch for just a breath before he pulled her closer, and she stopped thinking entirely. At 3 a.m, she was pressed against his chest, her ear over his heartbeat, her face wet in the way that had nothing to do with sadness, and everything to do with relief. The specific relief of putting down something enormously heavy that you have been carrying so long you forgot you were carrying it. He held her without making her feel ridiculous, one hand in her hair, his mouth at her temple, steady and present and real. "I've got you," he said quietly into her hair. Just that. She believed him completely, without question, without hesitation. That was the thing she would turn over in the weeks that followed. Not the night, not his hands or his mouth or the warmth of him, but those 3 words and the fact that she had believed them the way you believe something you have always known. Like recognition, like her body understood something her brain had not yet received the information for. She woke at 6 a.m, grey light through the curtains, the city in that rare, brief quiet before it remembers what it is. She reached beside her without opening her eyes. Empty. She opened them. The space beside her still held his warmth. On her side of the bed, the side she had not been sleeping on before that night, sat a glass of water she had not put there and did not remember him placing. The small, specific tenderness of it hit her somewhere unguarded. But he was gone. No note, no number, no name. Just gone the way the rain had gone, completely and without explanation, leaving only the shape of itself behind. She lay still for a long time, listening to Seoul waking outside her window, listening to the absence of him in the apartment and deciding what to do with it. She got up, made tea, stood at the window with both hands around the cup and looked at the city, and told herself it was one night and one night only, and she was a woman who moved forward, and forward did not include lying in the warmth someone left behind. She believed that for exactly 3 weeks. Then she took the test. Then 3 more because the first had to be wrong and the second had to be a mistake. And by the 4th one, she was sitting on the bathroom floor with her back against the cold tile wall, and her knees pulled to her chest, and the most enormous quiet she had ever felt had settled over her like something permanent. Pregnant. The word sat with her in the bathroom, did not get louder or softer, did not apologize, just sat there, matter of fact and absolute, waiting for her to catch up, by a man with no name, in a city that was not hers, 12,000 kilometers from anyone who knew her whole story, with a career still finding its feet, and a bank account that required careful management, and a heart that was, if she was honest with herself, on the floor of a bathroom in Mapagu at 8 a.m, still picking itself up off the floor of a room in Lagos that had flowers in it. She sat there for a long time. Then she stood up, washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror, at the woman looking back, 26 years old, beautiful in the specific way of someone who has been through something real and not been destroyed by it. Eyes that had seen enough to know the world did not arrange itself around your plans and never would. Okay, she said quietly to that woman. Not fine. Not it will all work out. Just okay. The truest thing she had ever said to herself. An acknowledgement. A decision. This life inside her, unplanned and terrifying and entirely, completely hers, was going to be okay because she was going to make it okay. Because that was who she was. Because she had never once in her life waited for someone else to handle it. She went to her work table. She told no one, not Temmie, who would panic and book a flight and mean well, and make everything louder. Not her mother, who would make the silence between her words do all the terrible work. Nobody. She carried it alone the way she had always carried the things that mattered most, quietly, carefully, with both hands, and her eyes straight ahead. 6 weeks after that bathroom floor, Ms. Park called with the Kang Commission. Complete wardrobe consultation, custom pieces for a formal period, private family of significant social standing, high budget, full discretion required. Sylvia said yes before she finished the sentence, because she was 11 weeks pregnant and alone in a foreign city, and she needed this commission the way a person standing in deep water needs something solid beneath their feet. She learned the family name on her second visit to the building. She learned what the family name meant 3 days after that, from a wide-eyed textile intern who grabbed her arm in an elevator and whispered it like a warning, that the Kang family were not just wealthy, that they ran things in this city, things without official names, that you did not take a meeting with the Kang family unless you were already in their world or were prepared to be pulled into it entirely. Sylvia had thanked her, taken the elevator down, looked at the commission figure on the offer letter. Then she had gone home and decided that she was a fashion designer and not a detective, and that powerful families still needed clothes. And she was 11 weeks pregnant, and the shore was the shore regardless of who was holding it. She kept the commission. She arrived for her third consultation on a cold Tuesday morning, portfolio under her arm, her secret tucked so deep inside her that she had almost convinced herself it was simply part of her body now. Ordinary, unremarkable, hers alone. She was arranging fabric samples on the long consultation table, silks by weight, the way she always worked. Back to the door, hands moving through the familiar ritual of her craft. When the door behind her opened, she did not look up immediately. She was placing a bolt of cream silk and thinking about a collar construction and listening to Seoul 40 floors below the window. Miss Okoro. Her hand stopped. She knew that voice. She had heard it say get in through a rain-wet car window on a street in Itaewon. She had heard it say it doesn't have to matter tonight across an amber-lit table. She had heard it say I've got you in the dark of her apartment at 3 a.m. She turned around slowly. Kang Minho stood in the doorway of his family's consultation room. Dark suit, no tie. The tattoos invisible now under expensive fabric, but she knew they were there. She had pressed her fingers against them in the dark and felt him still beneath her touch. His face was exactly as she remembered it, and completely different simultaneously. In her memory, he was rain and warmth and a private world that lasted one night. Here he was authority and contained power, and a name that made textile interns grab people's arms in elevators. 3 full seconds. Neither of them moved. His eyes moved over her face with that same quality of attention, reading her the way he had read her that night, and then dropped, briefly, involuntarily, to her midsection, then back to her face. Something moved in his expression, something she did not have a name for, something that lived in the space between recognition and revelation. You work for Ms. Park, he said. His voice was perfectly, carefully controlled. I was hired to design for your family, she said. Her own steadiness surprised her. I didn't know it was your family. A pause that lasted exactly 1 breath too long. No, he said quietly. I imagine you didn't. She turned back to her fabric samples, placed the next swatch with hands that were only very slightly trembling. She was a professional. She was here to do a job. Whatever had happened between them in Hanam-dong 4 months ago on a rainy night was a chapter she had closed, and she was not opening it. She told herself that very convincingly. Minho stood in the doorway of his family's building and looked at the back of the woman who had been carrying his child for 11 weeks, without ever knowing his name. His jaw was tight. His hands were still. Everything about him was controlled except his eyes. And his eyes were saying something that the rest of him was not yet ready to say out loud. She kept arranging her samples. He kept standing in the doorway. And somewhere deep in the infrastructure of the building around them, in a room that neither of them could see, a phone was already ringing with news that would make the silence between them. This careful, loaded, devastating silence. The least dangerous thing in the entire building. The commission required 3 more visits. Each time he was there, not hovering, just present. The way certain people are present, gravitational, a weight you feel from across a floor. He remembered how she took her tea. He remembered what fabric she loved most. He left a note under her kimchi. 4 words. Be careful out there. No name. Small things. Specific things. The things you only remember about someone if you never stop paying attention from the very beginning. You should do that more, he said. Solve sleeve problems. Laugh like you mean it. She looked at him across the sketches, at this man who managed things without official names, and who had a sister whose jackets he let her steal, and who remembered how she took her tea, and who had held her in the dark at 3 a.m. and said, "I've got you," in a way she had not stopped hearing since. "You don't know me well enough to say that," she said. "No," he agreed, "but I would like to." The silence after that was different from every silence that had come before it. It was not professional distance. It was not the loaded quiet of 2 people navigating something complicated. It was simply 2 people sitting with the truth of something they had both been circling for weeks and had just very quietly, finally arrived at together. She looked away first, went back to the sleeve. He stayed another 20 minutes. When he left, he paused at the door. "Tonight," he said. Not a question. "Have dinner with me." She kept her eyes on the sketch. That would be unprofessional. "Yes," he said. "Have dinner with me anyway." She said nothing. At 7 that evening, her phone showed a message from a number she did not have saved. A restaurant name in Itaewon. 8 o'clock. Just that. She went. She told herself it was because she needed to understand the situation. Because he was her client, and she needed to manage the dynamic carefully and professionally. She told herself a lot of things on the subway to Itaewon that evening. The truth was she went because she wanted to, and she was done lying to herself about the things she wanted. The restaurant was small and quiet and clearly the kind of place that did not appear on any public list. The kind that existed in a different layer of the city, accessible only to people who already knew. He was already there when she arrived, sitting in a corner with his back to the wall, and she would only understand later that this was not preference but necessity. A man who needed to see every entrance in every room because the cost of not seeing them was something he had already paid once and would not pay again. He stood when she walked in. She had worn something she made herself, black, structured at the shoulder, the kind of piece that said, "I know exactly who I am, and I dressed this morning for myself, not for anyone's reaction." His eyes moved over her, and the appreciation in them was direct and completely unperformed. "You made that," he said. "I make most of what I wear." "Of course you do." Something warm moved in his expression, and he pulled out the chair across from his and waited. "Sit down, Sylvia." It was the first time he had used her name outside the consultation room. It landed differently here, softer and more deliberate, like something he had been saving for the right moment and had decided this was it. They ate. They talked. Not the careful professional conversation of the consultation room, but the real kind. The kind that went somewhere unexpected and did not apologize for it. He told her about growing up in a family where power was the primary language, and affection got translated into it so completely that by the time he was old enough to notice, he could barely tell the difference between being loved and being managed. She told him about growing up in a house where you learned early to be useful or be invisible, and she had chosen useful and paid for it in ways she was still in the process of calculating. "You left," he said. "That takes more than most people have." "I ran," she said honestly. "Running is leaving with urgency." He looked at her across the table. "It is still a choice. Most people never make it at all." She studied him. "And you? Have you ever run from anything?" A long pause. Something old and unresolved moved in his expression. There are things you cannot run from when your name is what my name is. The city runs with you. She understood that. She did not yet understand the full weight of it, but she understood it. He walked her out at 10:30. The night was cold and the Itaewon street was quiet, and they stood on the pavement outside the restaurant, and the charged quality of the air between them was not remotely subtle, and neither of them was pretending it was. He reached out and adjusted the collar of her coat, a small and precise gesture, his fingers at her neck for just a moment, and she held completely still. I have been thinking about something since the consultation room, he said quietly. Don't, she said. Sylvia. Minho. His name in her mouth. The first time she had said it like a choice rather than a reaction. Stopped him completely. This is already complicated. I know. You don't know how complicated. He looked at her steadily. His hand had dropped from her collar, but he had not stepped back. The space between them was very small, and neither of them was doing anything about that. Then tell me. She looked at him. At this man who was patient and dangerous, and attentive and honest, in the specific way that only people who have spent a long time lying about other things are honest when it actually matters. At this man whose child was growing inside her in the dark and quiet of her body right now in this moment on this cold Itaewon pavement, and who did not know and could not know yet. Not tonight, she said. He studied her face for a long moment, reading it the way he always read it, completely, carefully, without rushing to a conclusion. Then he leaned forward very slowly and pressed his lips to her forehead. Not a romantic gesture. Something more careful than that. Something that felt like I see you and I am not going anywhere regardless. And straightened back up. Good night, Sylvia, he said. She walked to the subway with her hand pressed flat against her stomach under her coat, and her eyes straight ahead, and her chest full of something she did not yet have a safe name for. 3 days later, the Jeon Syndicate came for her again, and this time they were not sending a warning. She was leaving the Kang building at 6:15 on a Tuesday evening. Portfolio under one arm, phone in her hand, scrolling through a supplier message about a delayed fabric delivery. The lobby was busy, the tail end of the building's working day, people moving in and out through the revolving glass doors, the security desk managing the last visitor sign-outs of the evening. She was 4 steps from the revolving door when she felt it. Not heard it. Felt it. The specific shift in a lobby's atmosphere when something that does not belong enters it. A change in the air pressure of a space. The way certain animals feel weather before it arrives. She looked up from her phone. 2 men, standing near the entrance to the parking structure that connected to the building's lower levels. Not building staff. Wrong posture, wrong stillness. Not visitors, no badges, no sign-out procedure. Standing with the specific quality of waiting that she recognized from Dongdaemun. Deliberate, positioned. The kind of waiting that has a specific outcome already decided. One of them was looking directly at her. She turned immediately, back toward the security desk. Pulled out her phone and was already pulling up Jaewon's number when she registered the third man. Not by sight, but by the sudden presence of him directly at her left shoulder. Impossibly close. And then a hand closed around her upper arm, and she was being steered sideways toward the service corridor that ran alongside the lobby's east wall, and the grip was not asking. Don't make noise, the man said. Low. Practiced. She made noise. She drove her heel down onto his instep with every kilogram of her body weight behind it. Full force. No hesitation. The way her cousin had drilled into her across 6 Saturday afternoons in a Lagos community centre 4 years ago, that she had complained about attending at the time and was now silently and completely grateful for. The man made a sharp involuntary sound, and his grip fractured, and she twisted hard left, and in the same motion drove the metal corner of her portfolio into his face, with both hands, and the impact was solid and real, and she did not wait to see the result. She ran. Not the controlled fast walk of Dongdaemun, full running, portfolio abandoned, bag clutched against her body, because there were 3 of them, and she was in a building corridor, and this was not surveillance anymore, and she knew it. She made it 6 steps. The second man came out of a doorway ahead of her, and she had no time. She checked left, checked right. The corridor walls were solid, and his hands were already reaching, and she pulled back, and threw her bag at his face as a distraction and ducked under his arm, and he caught her anyway, both arms around her from behind, lifting her off the ground, and she fought, elbows, heels, the back of her head, everything she had, everything she could reach. And she was screaming, and the man was cursing, and the corridor was full of the sound of it, and nobody was coming, and nobody was. The door at the end of the corridor exploded open. Not opened, exploded, hitting the wall with a sound like a gunshot, the metal door handle punching a crater in the plasterboard, and two men came through it moving the way she had never seen people move outside of a film. Low and fast and utterly without hesitation, covering the corridor distance in what felt like no time at all. And then the fight in that corridor became something entirely different. Minho's head of security, a man she knew only as Mr. Cho, who she had seen standing by elevators and nodding to her politely when she arrived for consultations, hit the man holding her like he had been waiting his entire professional life for this specific moment. The grip on her broke completely. She stumbled forward and caught herself against the wall. The second security operative went for the man she had hit with the portfolio, back on his feet now, blood on his face, coming forward, and they collided in the narrow corridor space, and the sound of it was ugly and real, and nothing like the choreographed violence of screens. This was 4 people in a concrete corridor with no room and no rules, and the John men, despite being there with intention and preparation, were discovering rapidly that they were outmatched in every measurable way. Mr. Cho put the first man on the ground in 40 seconds, not gracefully, efficiently. 2 strikes and a takedown that used the corridor wall as a third party, and left the man face down and not getting up quickly. The second operative and the second John man went longer. The John man had training, real training, and he used the corridor's narrowness to his advantage and landed 2 hits that would leave marks. But the operative was better and angrier, and 60 seconds after the door had exploded open, that man was on the ground too. The corridor went quiet. Both John men down. Breathing. She could see that. She needed to see that. She was pressing herself against the wall with both hands flat on the cold surface, and her chest heaving, and she needed to know they were breathing. The 2 operatives were straightening. Mr. Cho had his phone out, speaking rapid Korean into it. Then the door opened again. Minho, no jacket. Shirt sleeves pushed to the elbow, the tattoos completely visible on his forearms, dark and intricate, and shifting with every movement of his hands. His eyes found her across the corridor in the first half second, and the expression on his face when they did was something she was completely unprepared for. Not anger. Not the controlled authority of the consultation room. Not even the warmth she had seen in the restaurant. Something raw. Something that had no performance in it at all. Something that looked like a man who had been told something was happening to someone who mattered, and had covered the distance between that information and this corridor at a speed that had nothing professional about it. He crossed the corridor in 5 steps. His hands came up to her face, both palms at her jaw, tilting her face up, checking her eyes, her neck, her arms, methodical and fast and barely controlled, the control costing him visibly. "Are you hurt?" Not a question. A demand. "I'm fine. Did they touch you?" One of them grabbed my arm and another one caught me, but "Show me your arm." She pushed her sleeve up. The red mark from the grip was already deepening into something that would be a bruise by morning. He looked at it for a long, still moment, and something moved through his expression that was very quiet and absolutely without limit. The specific anger of a man who has just seen evidence of someone else's hands on a person he has decided to protect. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Mr. Cho, watching from 3 meters away, was already on a second phone call. "Minho." She put her hand over his where it had stilled on her arm. "I'm okay. Look at me. I'm okay." He looked at her hand on his, then at her face. The rawness in his expression did not go away, but something in it steadied, settled into something more controlled but no less intense. "This is the second time," he said. His voice was very low. "Dong Damon was the first. You didn't tell me." She went still. "How do you know about Dong Damon?" A pause. 1 second too long. "I know things that happen in this city," he said carefully. "Especially things that happen near people connected to my building." She studied him, She filed it. "What do they want with me?" she said. "I am a fashion designer. I have been in Seoul for 4 months. I have no connection to any criminal enterprise." "You have a connection now." His eyes held hers. "To this building, to this family. That is enough for them." Part of her believed it. She could see the truth in it. She could also see, clearly because she was paying attention, and had been paying attention since the moment she turned around in the consultation room and found him in the doorway, that it was not all of the truth. "I want to go home," she said. "You're not going home alone." "Minho, Sylvia." Her name. Quiet and absolute, and leaving no space for argument. "You are not going home alone tonight." She looked at the 2 John men on the floor, at the corridor wall with the door handle crater in it, at Mr. Cho speaking quietly into his phone. "Fine," she said. He drove her himself. The black car moved through Seoul's evening, and neither of them spoke for the first 10 minutes, and the city filled the silence between them, its lights and its noise and its enormous, indifferent aliveness. She looked at his hands on the wheel, at the tattoos on his forearms where his sleeves were still pushed up, at the set of his jaw and the way he checked his mirrors with the specific vigilance of someone for whom checking mirrors had never been routine. "You're not going to tell me everything," she said finally. "No," he said, honestly, without apology. "But you'll tell me I'm safe." "Yes." "Is that actually true?" He looked at her across the car. In the passing light of the city, his eyes were completely direct. "As long as I can make it true. Yes, that is actually true." She looked at him for a long moment, at everything she knew about him and everything she did not, at the weight of what she was carrying and the weight of what he did not know she was carrying. "Okay," she said quietly. He walked her to a door in Mapogu. The stairwell light was the specific yellow of Korean apartment buildings at night, and her landing was small, and Mrs. O's door was closed, and Seoul was doing its nighttime things below the window at the end of the hall. She unlocked her door, turned in the doorway. He was looking at her with that unguarded look, the one he let through sometimes, the one that had nothing controlled about it, the one that lived underneath everything else and came to the surface only when he had stopped managing it. "Come inside," she said. Not seduction, not strategy, just the truth of not wanting him on the other side of a closed door. He came inside. Her apartment was small and warm, and entirely itself. Fabric samples on every surface, sketches pinned above the work table, books stacked on the kitchen counter. Mrs. O's kimchi, a life built carefully in a small space that had become hers in a way she had not expected Seoul to become anything. He stood in the middle of it and looked around with the attention he gave to everything. Really looked, the way he looked at her sketches, taking it in properly. "You built this," he said. "I build things," she said. "It's what I do." He turned to look at her. She was leaning against the closed door. He was in the center of the room. The apartment was small enough that the distance between them was not very much distance at all. "Sylvia," he said, the way he said her name, like a decision already made. "I know," she said. "I need you too." "Minho." She pushed off the door, crossed the room, put her hand flat against his chest, over his heartbeat, exactly where it had been in the dark 4 months ago when she had pressed her face into his neck and believed 3 words completely, and looked up at him. "I know." He looked down at her hand, then at her face. Then he kissed her. Not like Hanam-dong. That had been discovery, first contact, the electricity of a beginning. This was a man who had been exercising restraint for weeks and had made a complete and quiet decision to stop. His hands came to her face, and the kiss was deep and certain, and without apology, and she grabbed the front of his shirt with both hands and kissed him back with everything she had been keeping behind the professional composure and the careful distance and the cream silk on the consultation table. He walked her backward until her back met the wall and kissed her like she was the answer to a question he had been carrying for a very long time. She pulled him closer and he made a sound low in his throat, and his hands moved from her face to her waist, and she felt the warmth of them through the fabric of her dress, and thought, "I am not being careful," and then thought, "I do not care." He pulled back just enough to look at her. His thumb moved across her cheek. His eyes were dark and completely present. The most present she had ever seen him. No management, no control, just him. "I have been thinking about this since the day you walked into that consultation room," he said. "I know," she said. "And before that?" She went completely still. "Before that?" He held her gaze. Something complex and layered moved through his expression. "Before that," he said quietly. She studied him. The words sat between them, doing something she did not yet have the full shape of. "What does that mean?" she said. He kissed her instead of answering, and she let him because whatever it meant could wait. Because she was shaking slightly from the corridor and the grip on her arm, and being lifted off her feet by a man who was taking her somewhere, and she had needed to not be alone. And he was here, and he was warm, and his heartbeat was steady under her hand. He held her against him, and she pressed her face into his neck and breathed. His hand moved in her hair, and his mouth was at her temple, and the specific feeling of being held by someone who is not going anywhere settled over her like something she had not known she was cold without. She did not tell him that night. She could have. The warmth and the small apartment and the city outside and the safety of his arms. It was the closest she had come. But she understood somewhere deep and instinctive that once she told him, the world around both of them would change in ways she could not yet see. And she needed a little more time in the version of things where she still held the shape of her own story. He left at midnight, pressed his lips to her temple at the door, told her his men would be outside all night. She looked at him. "All night?" "All night," he said simply. Like this was obvious. Like this was the only reasonable response to the evening they had just had. She said goodnight, closed the door, stood with her back against it in her small, warm apartment, and pressed both palms flat against her stomach. 12 weeks. "I know," she said quietly. "I'll tell him." She needed a little more time. She did not get it. Park Jae-won was waiting outside the fabric supplier in Dongdaemun the next morning. Not ambush. Standing openly, hands visible, a coffee in each hand, watching her approach with an expression that was professionally warm and personally complicated in ways she was becoming more attuned to reading. "I heard about last night," he said when she reached him. "From who?" "I told you to call me if anything happened. It was handled before I could call. By Kang Minho's men." He said the name carefully, watching her face for what it did. She kept it level. "Yes." He handed her the second coffee. She took it because she needed it. "Walk with me," he said. They walked through the Dongdaemun fabric district, the morning market building itself around them, vendors unrolling bolts across narrow lanes, the air smelling of dye and cold and sesame from a street cart. "The Jeon Syndicate's interest in you has escalated significantly," Jaewon said. 2 direct approaches in 3 weeks. That is not surveillance. That is intent. They have made a decision about you." "What decision?" He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. "What is your relationship with Kang Minho?" She looked at him sideways. "I am designing clothes for his family." "Just clothes." "I am a fashion designer. That is the entirety of what I do." He looked at her with those careful eyes behind the frameless glasses. "Sylvia, I need you to understand something clearly. The Kang family and the Jeon Syndicate have been at direct war for 3 years. That war has cost people their lives. Anyone who moves from being a peripheral contractor to being something closer to the Kang family becomes a significant target. Not a surveillance subject. A target." She kept walking, kept her face neutral. "What are you saying to me?" "I am saying be careful about how deep you are going." A pause. "And I am saying that if you have seen or heard anything inside that building, anything about operations, movements, family matters that seem unusual, I need you to tell me, because that information could end something that has been hurting people in this city for 3 years." She stopped walking. She turned and looked at him fully, at this man with his clean coat and his genuine-seeming warmth, and his prosecutor's card and his very convenient presence on a Dongdaemun street. The first time someone tried to take her somewhere, she did not want to go. You are asking me to inform on my clients, she said. I'm asking you to help me protect people, he said, including yourself. She looked at him for a long moment, at the warmth in his expression that she could not fully determine was real or constructed, at the card he had given her and the coffee in her hand, and all the ways this man had positioned himself as the safe choice in her soul life. I don't know anything about the Kang family's operations, she said. I design their clothes. That is my complete relationship with them. He nodded slowly, handed her a fresh card. Things are going to move quickly now. The syndicate doesn't slow down after 2 failed approaches. They accelerate. Keep this somewhere easy to reach. She took it. Jaewon, she said, why were you in Dongdaemun that first day? That specific street? That specific time? He looked at her. I was following up on a case lead, he said. A lead that placed you on the exact street I was on at the exact moment 3 men were approaching me. A pause that lasted 1 second too long. Seoul is a large city. Sometimes, don't, she said quietly. Don't finish that sentence. He looked at her. She looked at him. They stood in the fabric market with the morning building around them, and the knowledge that neither of them fully believed the other sitting openly between them, like a third person in the conversation. Be careful, he said finally, quietly, and this time she thought, she could not be certain, but she thought, that it was real. She thanked him for the coffee and walked to her supplier appointment, and spent the entire session thinking about 2 men who both gave her partial truths, and called it protection, and how the difference between them was not yet clear enough to act on. That evening, Minho came to the consultation room where she was working late and stood in the doorway watching her sketch before she looked up. You went somewhere with Jaewon this morning, he said. She put her pencil down slowly. You're having me followed. I'm having you protected. A beat. There is a difference. Not from where I'm standing. He came into the room, sat across from her. The city was enormous outside the window and the room was very still. Park Jaewon is a senior prosecutor, he said. Even, factual. He has been building a case against my family for 2 years. He is not on your street and not in your coffee shop because he wants to protect you. Why then? Because you are close to me. He knows it. He wants to use it. She held his gaze. He said something very similar about you. Something moved in Minho's jaw. I imagine he did. So I have 2 men, she said, both telling me the other cannot be trusted, both appearing exactly when I need someone, both offering protection that comes with conditions. He looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Then very quietly, I don't have conditions. You have secrets. Yes. Simply. No deflection. No qualification. I have secrets, but not about you. Never about you. She looked at him across her own work spread across the table between them, at the man who had tea delivered without being asked, and remembered what she said about Japanese denim, and had run through a building to get to a service corridor. Before that, she said, what did you mean in my apartment? Before the consultation room. He was quiet for a long moment. She watched him decide to tell her. I knew who you were, he said, before you came to my building. The room shifted. How? She said. I saw you at an event in Lagos, 14 months ago. A fashion showcase. I was there for other reasons entirely. You were presenting a collection. A pause. I had someone find out who you were after. She was doing the mathematics. Lagos, 14 months ago. Before Emeka. Before Seoul. Before any of it. You had someone monitor me, she said slowly. I had someone confirm you were still in Lagos. When you came to Seoul, you knew, yes. The event in Itaewon, the rain. I knew you would be there. The car. Yes. You were waiting for me. Yes. The pieces assembled themselves and the picture they made was large and cold and carefully constructed. She stood up. The chair scraped back hard. She put both hands flat on the table and looked at him and felt something enormous move through her. Not just the betrayal of the rainy night, but the full architecture of it. How far back it went. How many decisions had been made about her life by someone who had not asked. You engineered it, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Quiet the way decisions are quiet. The night. The bar. Me believing it was the rain and the wine and something that just happened to two people. Sylvia. You decided you wanted me. She was not shouting. She almost wished she was. Shouting would have been easier than this cold, precise clarity. And you moved things around until the situation was arranged the way you wanted it. And I. Her voice fractured, and she was furious at herself for that. Furious at the fracture. I thought it was the first time in my entire life that something had just happened. Not arranged. Not managed. Not someone else's plan with me inside it. Just rain and a stranger and one honest night. It was real. He was on his feet too. His voice was stripped of everything controlled. Raw in a way she had not heard from him. Everything in that bar. Everything that night. Everything since. I arranged the meeting. I could not arrange what happened after. I did not expect. You don't get to make that distinction, she said. Sylvia, please. I am leaving. She picked up her portfolio. Don't follow me. He didn't. She rode the elevator down alone, crossed the lobby, walked out into Seoul's night and kept walking for 20 minutes before she stopped on a bridge over the Han River and stood looking at the black water below and the lights of the city on both banks and breathed. He had arranged it. He had seen her in Lagos and decided and tracked her to Seoul and positioned himself outside a building in the rain and called it a chance encounter. And she had believed it because she had needed something to be unplanned. She had needed one thing in her life to not be someone else's design. And she was carrying his child, and he did not know. And somewhere in the city her phone was ringing. She pulled it out. Lagos number. Not Temi. Not her mother. Emeka. She stared at his name on the screen for 4 full rings. For the count of 4, she stood on the bridge above the Han River and thought about a room in Lagos with flowers in it, and an ivory silk dress and the specific silence of a decision that felt final. She answered, Sylvia. His voice. Smooth. Familiar. The voice she had spent 3 years believing when it told her things it did not mean. I'm in Seoul. The bridge. The black water. The city lights on both banks. Why? She said. I need to see you. A pause. Something underneath his smoothness she had not heard before. Something harder, more specific, less performed. I need to tell you some things. About why I did what I did and what has been happening, and another pause. About the people you've been spending time with here. Something cold moved through her. What people? She said carefully. The Kang family, Emeka said. And the smoothness was gone entirely now, replaced by something she was hearing from him for the first time. Something that sounded like actual urgency, like actual fear. Sylvia, I need you to listen to me very carefully right now. You are standing in the middle of something that has been built around you for a long time. And I am the only person who can give you the full picture of what it is and why your name is in it. She stood on the bridge. The Han River moved below her, black and patient, carrying the city's light on its surface. She pressed her free hand flat against her stomach. 13 weeks. A life she had decided to protect. A secret she had been carrying alone across 4 months and 12,000 kilometers. And one rainy night that had turned out to be nothing like what she thought it was. Where are you? She said. Emeka told her. She stood on the bridge for one more moment, looking at the water, at the city, at the reflection of everything built around her without her knowledge, shimmering on the surface of the river, like something that had always been there, always been visible, and she had simply not known yet how to read it. Then she walked off the bridge, and into the city, and toward the conversation that was going to change the shape of everything. She found Emeka in a hotel bar in Gangnam. Not a cheap hotel. Not the kind of place a man staying low would choose. The kind of hotel that had a lobby designed to make you feel like money was the natural state of things, and everything else was temporary. All marble and low lighting and staff who looked through you politely while seeing everything. He was at a corner table. Dark suit. The same easy posture she had spent 3 years reading as confidence, and had only recently started understanding as performance. He stood when he saw her, and she stopped 4 feet away from him and looked at him the way you look at something you used to know very well and are now seeing for the first time with accurate eyes. He looked the same. That was the infuriating thing. He looked completely the same. Sylvia. He said her name with warmth he had not earned back. Sit down, she said, and say what you came to say. He sat. She sat across from him, did not take off her coat, did not accept the drink he signaled for, put her hands flat on the table and looked at him and waited. He looked at her for a moment. Something moved across his face that she had never seen there before. Not the smoothness, not the performance. Something that looked, uncomfortably, like genuine fear. How long have you been working for the John Syndicate? She said. He went very still. How long, Emeka? A pause. Then, quietly, with none of the smoothness. 4 years. 4 years. She sat with that number. Sat with what it meant. 4 years meant before her. 4 years meant the entire relationship. Every dinner, every plan, every I love you, every fine I will handle it, had been built on top of something she had never been shown. You used me as cover, she said. It wasn't. He stopped. Looked at his hands. In the beginning it wasn't like that. You were. I wanted to protect you from it. I kept you away from it deliberately. Until you didn't. Until they told me to end it, he said. Sylvia, the cheating, the party. I did not want to do it that way. They told me to separate from you cleanly. No confrontation, no explanation. Just... He exhaled. They needed me mobile. No attachments. What I didn't expect was that I would go to Seoul. Was that you would go to Seoul, he said. And I didn't expect... He stopped again. Say it, she said. I didn't expect you to end up with him. His voice had something raw in it. With Kang Minho. She kept her face completely level. I am his family's designer. Sylvia. He looked at her directly. I have been watching this city for 4 years. I know what it looks like when Minho Kang drives a woman home himself. I know what it looks like when his men are stationed outside a building in Mapagu all night. I know what it looks like. A pause. And so do the people I work for. The cold settled deeper. What does that mean? She said. It means you are not a contractor to them anymore, Emeka said. It means they have upgraded your classification. It means the 2 approaches, Dongdaemun, the building corridor. Those were not warnings. Those were assessments. They were seeing how protected you are, how close you actually are to him. He leaned forward. Sylvia, they are going to use you to get to Minho. Not threaten you. Use you. There is a plan already in motion and you are the center of it. She looked at him. Why are you telling me this? She said. He was quiet for a moment. Because I am not... He stopped. Started again. I have done things I cannot undo. I know that. But I am not willing to let them use you. Not you. That is very convenient now, she said. I know. You destroyed our engagement to keep me away from your criminal employers, and now you are in Seoul warning me about them. I know how it sounds. Do you? She looked at him steadily. Do you know that because of the night you staged at that party, I ended up in Seoul alone? Do you know what alone in Seoul looked like? Do you know what I have been carrying alone since I got here? Something moved across his face. His eyes dropped to her midsection for just a fraction of a second, the same involuntary drop that Minho's had made in the consultation room doorway, and came back to her face, and she watched him understand, and watched him decide not to say it out loud. She did not confirm it. She did not deny it. Tell me about the plan, she said. Everything, Emeka told her. It took 40 minutes. She did not interrupt. She sat with her hands flat on the table and listened to the architecture of something that had been built around her for months. Longer than she had been in Seoul. Longer than she had known Minho's name. The Jaeon Syndicate had been watching Minho's family for 3 years. They had identified his operational patterns, his security arrangements, his pressure points. They had concluded that Minho Kang, cold, controlled, seemingly untouchable, had one weakness they had never been able to exploit, because it had never existed before. Someone he would break his own rules for. They want to take you, Emeka said. Not hurt you. Take you. Use you to draw him somewhere controlled. Somewhere his security infrastructure doesn't cover. Somewhere they choose. He paused. They have a timeline. When, she said. 8 days. 8 days. She sat with that. There is one more thing, Emeka said. His voice shifted into something careful. The Jeon Syndicate is not operating alone on this. They have someone inside the Kang building. Someone with access. Someone who has been feeding them information about you specifically. Your schedule. Your movements inside the building. Your relationship with Minho. For weeks. She went still. Who? She said. I don't have a name, he said. I have a description. Someone on the administrative side. Senior level. Someone who has been in the Kang family's orbit for a long time. She thought about Ms. Park with her tablet and her schedule, and her knowledge of every consultation, every arrival time, every room Sylvia had been in. She thought about Madame Kang. Something cold and specific moved through her. I need to go, she said. She stood up. Sylvia. Emeka's voice. She stopped but did not turn around. I am sorry. I know that does not fix anything, but I am sorry. She stood with her back to him for a moment, with the hotel bar around her and Seoul outside, and 8 days and a mole in a building, and a man who had arranged a rainy night, and a baby she had not yet told him about. Get out of Seoul, she said, tonight, because when this is over and Minho finds out you are here, and he will find out, you do not want to be findable. She walked out without looking back. She called Jaewon from the street outside. He answered on the second ring. Sylvia. I need to talk to you, she said. Not tomorrow. Now. And I need you to tell me something true for once. A pause. Where are you? She told him. He arrived in 11 minutes. They stood on a quieter side street off the main Gangnam Strip, the city doing its late evening business around them, and she told him what Emeka had told her. Not everything. Not the timeline. Not the mole. Not the parts that touched Minho directly. Enough. She watched his face while she talked, and she saw the things that moved across it that he was not fast enough to fully manage. The confirmation in his eyes when she mentioned things he already knew. The genuine surprise when she mentioned the 8-day timeline. You already knew about the plan, she said when she finished. He did not deny it. That was something. I knew about the targeting. I didn't know about the timeline. And the mole inside the building. A pause. I had a suspicion. Who? I can't. Jaewon. She stepped closer to him. I am standing in the middle of this. I am the target. I have 8 days. You do not get to tell me you can't. He looked at her for a long moment. The careful, professional warmth in his expression had shifted into something more complicated and more honest than she had seen from him before. Something that had the shape of a man choosing between his case and his conscience. I need you to come in, he said, formally, as a protected witness. I can keep you safe and I can end this case in a way that... Protected from who, she said. The Jeon Syndicate or Kang Minho. He was quiet. Because those are two different kinds of protection, she said, and I need to know which one you are actually offering me. He looked at her, and in his eyes, behind the glasses, behind the professional, warmth, behind the 2 years of case building that had her name in it, she saw something she had not seen from him before. Something genuine and conflicted, and not entirely professional. Both, he said quietly. I am trying to offer you both. She looked at him for a long moment. I'll think about it, she said. Don't follow me tonight. She walked away from him into the city, and this time she did not press her hand to her stomach. She kept both hands free and her eyes forward, and her mind running through everything she had just learned with the specific focused clarity of a woman who had decided that the time for carrying things alone was over. She needed to tell Minho, not tomorrow, not when she was ready, not when she had figured out how to control the shape of what came after. Tonight. She called his number. He answered before the first ring finished. Where are you? Not hello, not are you all right? Just where are you? The question of a man who had been waiting for her location since she left the building. "Gangnam," she said, "I need to see you. Tonight. I have something to tell you, and I should have told you a long time ago, and I am telling you now." A pause. Brief. "I'm sending a car. I don't need a car. I need you to be in your building when I get there. I need you to be alone." Another pause. "Okay," he said. "Just that. Just okay." She took the subway. 40 minutes across the city, the Han River visible briefly through the train windows as it crossed the bridge, the black water doing what the Han River always did, holding the city's light on its surface and moving underneath it with complete indifference to what the light cost. She rehearsed nothing. There was no version of this that rehearsal improved. He was in his private office on the 32nd floor when she arrived. Not the consultation room, not the formal spaces of the building, his actual office. A room that looked like him, clean lines, almost no decoration, one wall of windows giving Seoul the full 32 floors of itself, a single plant on the windowsill that she suspected someone else watered. He was standing when she walked in, jacket off, shirt sleeves, the tattoos visible, his eyes on her face the moment she cleared the door. She crossed the room and stood in front of him and looked at him and said it. "I'm pregnant." The room held its breath. "It is yours," she said, "from that night in Hanam-dong. I have known for almost 3 months. I did not tell you because I didn't know your name, and then because I was afraid, and then because everything got complicated, and then because I kept telling myself I needed more time." She stopped. "I don't have more time, and you deserve to know before now. I'm sorry it took me this long." Minho did not move. He stood in front of her, and the expression on his face was, she could not name it. It was too large for a single name. It moved through things she recognized. Shock, something overwhelming, something that was not anger, but was in the same family as it. And then it arrived somewhere she had not expected. He sat down. Not dramatically. Not the collapse of a man receiving terrible news. He sat down in the chair behind him the way a man sits when his legs have made a decision his composure has not yet caught up to. He put both elbows on the desk, both hands over his face. The room was very quiet. She stood in front of his desk and let him have the silence and did not try to fill it because there was nothing to fill it with that would make it smaller. After a long moment, he took his hands from his face. He looked at her. "How far?" he said. His voice was different. Stripped of everything controlled. Just the question, raw and direct. 13 weeks, she said. He absorbed that. She watched him do the mathematics the same way she had done them on the bathroom floor in Mapagu. "You have been in this building," he said slowly, "sitting across from me, working in my family's consultation room, for weeks." "Yes." "Carrying my child." "Yes." "And not." He stopped. "I know," she said quietly. "I know." He stood up. He came around the desk and he stood in front of her and he looked at her with those eyes that had always read her completely. And she held very still and let him read her now. All of it. Everything she had been carrying. No management, no composure. Just the truth of it laid out in her face for him to see clearly. He reached out and put his hand against her face. His thumb moved across her cheek. "You were alone with this," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was something much more painful than an accusation. It was the specific grief of a man understanding something he could not go back and change. "Yes," she said, "for 3 months." "Yes." His jaw tightened. His eyes closed for a moment. When they opened, they were wet in a way she had not seen from him and had not expected, and the sight of it did something to her chest that she would feel for a long time after. "I should have," he started. "You didn't know," she said. "I arranged to find you," he said. "I tracked you across a city. And I still didn't know the most important thing." She looked at him. "No one knew that. That was mine. I kept it mine because it was the only thing I felt I had control of." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into him, both arms around her, one hand in her hair, and she pressed her face against his chest and felt his heartbeat. And this time when she cried, it was not the release of putting something down. It was something else, something that did not have a clean name. Grief and relief and the specific complicated feeling of finally being seen in the most vulnerable thing. He held her without saying anything because there was nothing to say, and he seemed to understand that. They stood like that for a long time. Then she pulled back. "I need to tell you something else," she said, his eyes on her face, reading her. "Tell me." She told him everything. Emika in the hotel bar, the 4 years, the plan, the 8-day timeline, the mole inside his building. She told him cleanly and completely the way she had decided on the subway that she was going to. No softening, no managing, just the full picture laid out so he had what he needed. She watched his face while she talked, watched the grief of the pregnancy moment close down, and the other version of him come forward. The one that managed things without official names. The one whose stillness was more dangerous than another man's rage. The one that ran with the city. By the time she finished talking, his face was completely still. 8 days, he said. That is what Emeka said. And a mole in the building. His voice was very quiet. Someone administrative, senior level. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. She could see him running it, all of it, the whole architecture of what she had just given him, reassembling it into something he could act on. "Ms. Park," he said. "I don't know," she said. "That was my first thought, but I don't know." He shook his head slowly. "Not Ms. Park." His voice was flat. "Someone who has been in this family's orbit for a long time." He paused. "Someone who has been feeding them information about you specifically." He picked up his phone, made a call, said 4 words in Korean that she did not understand, and ended the call. Then he looked at her. "You need to stay here tonight, in this building. I cannot." He stopped, reassembled. "I need you where my security covers you. Completely. Tonight. I have things at the apartment. I will have them brought." He looked at her with an expression that was several things simultaneously. The man who had just found out he was going to be a father, and the man who ran things without official names, and the man who was looking at her like she was the most important variable in an equation he was now solving with everything he had. "Please," he said. "Just that." She looked at him. "Okay," she said. He set her up in a room on the 31st floor. Not a guest room, something better than that. A private apartment within the building with its own kitchen and its own windows, giving the same soul that his office gave. Enormous and glittering and entirely indifferent. He came to the door at midnight, knocked, did not assume. She opened it. He stood in the doorway in a dark shirt, the tattoos visible on his forearms, and looked at her with an expression that had nothing managed about it. "How are you feeling?" he said. Meaning the pregnancy, meaning 3 months of alone, meaning everything. "Tired," she said honestly. "And less alone than I was this morning." Something moved through his expression. He reached out and tucked a piece of her hair behind her ear. A small gesture, a careful one, and looked at her face like he was memorizing it. "I need to tell you something," he said. "More?" she said. The corner of his mouth moved. The manipulation, the event in Lagos, tracking you to Seoul, the rainy night. "I need you to know that what I felt that night was not part of any plan. You were. But not that. Not the bar. Not 3 in the morning. Not..." He stopped. "Not any of it." She looked at him. "I know you believe that. But you don't." "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I am trying to." He held her gaze. "That's enough," he said. "That is more than enough." He pressed his lips to her forehead and said goodnight and left, and she stood in the doorway of the 31st floor apartment watching him walk away and press both hands against her stomach, and thought about a woman who had come to Seoul with 2 suitcases and a broken engagement and had somehow ended up here, in this building, carrying this secret inside this story, and tried to decide if she was the most unlucky or the most extraordinary version of herself she had ever been. She was still deciding when her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. 4 words. She already knows. Run. She stared at the screen. She already knows. Madam Kang. Not a mole feeding information to the John Syndicate from inside the building. The John Syndicate getting information from someone who had been inside the Kang family's orbit for longer than anyone. Someone who had her own reasons for wanting the pregnancy to end. Someone for whom the prophecy was not superstition, but absolute conviction. Minho's mother was not just aware of the pregnancy. She was the source. Sylvia was already moving, grabbing her bag, her phone, her coat, when the door to the 31st floor apartment opened. Not Minho. Two men she had not seen before. Not Mr. Cho. Not the operatives from the corridor. Men she did not recognize with faces that had no warmth in them and eyes that had already decided. Madam Kang requests your presence, the first one said. Sylvia looked at them. At the door behind them. At the window and the 31 floors of Seoul below it. She put her phone in her coat pocket and looked at the two men in her doorway and squared her shoulders. All right, she said. They took her up. Not down through the building and out into the city. Up. 3 more floors to the 34th. A level she had never been taken to on any of her consultation visits. A level that was not on the directory by the elevators. A level that the building had, but did not advertise. Madam Kang was waiting. She was exactly what Sylvia had expected and nothing like it simultaneously. A small woman, elegantly dressed in the specific way of women who have worn expensive clothes for so long they no longer notice them. Her face was Minho's face, organized differently. The same bones, the same quality of stillness, but where his stillness was controlled and chosen, hers was absolute, like it had never been anything else. She was standing at the window with Seoul at her back, and she looked at Sylvia the way Sylvia had once watched a seamstress look at a garment that needed taking apart. Not unkind, but completely without sentiment about what the taking apart required. Sit down, Ms. Okoro, she said. Sylvia did not sit. You know, Sylvia said. I have known for 6 weeks, Madam Kang said, since shortly after you began coming to this building. A pause. My son does not know that I know. He found out tonight because you told him. I am aware. The John Syndicate, Sylvia said. The information they have about me. About my schedule. About my relationship with Minho. That was you. Madam Kang looked at her without blinking. That is a serious accusation. Is it wrong? A pause. Long enough to be an answer. I did not arrange for you to be harmed, Madam Kang said. I arranged for you to be discouraged, frightened enough to leave, to take whatever you were carrying with you and go back to wherever you came from and build your life there away from mine. You sent men to grab me in a corridor, Sylvia said. Her voice was very steady. I have a bruise on my arm. That was not supposed to... Something moved across Madam Kang's face. So brief it was almost invisible. It was not supposed to go that far. But it did? Yes. A pause. It did. They looked at each other across the 34th floor. Outside, Seoul blazed and turned, enormous and indifferent. I know about the prophecy, Sylvia said. Something sharpened in Madam Kang's expression. Then you understand. I understand that you believe it. It is not belief. Her voice carried the specific weight of a woman who had organized her entire life around something she knew to be true, and had stopped explaining it to people who could not see it. It is knowledge. A child born to the Kang heir from a woman outside this world will either end the bloodline's curse or fulfill it in blood. I have watched this family for 50 years. I have seen what the curse takes. I am not willing to gamble my son's life and this family's survival on a prophecy that has not yet decided which way it falls. So you decided for it, Sylvia said. I decided to protect what I have spent my life building. By trying to remove me. Sylvia stepped forward. Just one step. Enough. I am standing here. I am not removed. I am 13 weeks pregnant in your building on your 34th floor, and your son knows, and I am not leaving and I am not frightened off. And whatever you arranged with the John Syndicate is over because I have already told him about the timeline and the mole, and by now his people are already... The door behind her opened. She heard it and turned, and Minho walked through it. He looked at his mother. His mother looked at him. The silence between them was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two people who knew each other completely and were now standing on opposite sides of something that could not be undone. "How long?" he said. His voice was very quiet. Madam Kang held his gaze. "Minho, how long have you known about her?" Not a question. The same delivery as Sylvia's "how long" to him 2 hours ago. The same quiet that was more dangerous than noise. 6 weeks, Madam Kang said. "And the John Syndicate?" A pause. "I needed her to leave," Madam Kang said. "I needed her to be frightened enough to. You gave my location to my enemies." His voice was barely above a whisper, and it was the most terrifying thing Sylvia had heard in a room full of terrifying things. "You gave them her schedule, her movements. You told them she mattered to me so they would use her. You—" He stopped. His jaw was so tight she could see it from across the room. "I told them enough to frighten her," Madam Kang said. "Not enough to—" "You do not get to decide where that line is." He stepped forward. "You gave my enemies a weapon and put her in the middle of it and told yourself it was controlled. While she was grabbed in a corridor in my own building. While she was alone for 3 months carrying my child in an apartment in Mapogu, because she did not feel safe enough to tell anyone." His voice cracked. "Not much, just enough. She was alone because of choices you made, because of information you gave. And you stood here in this building and watched me fall in love with her and said nothing." The room held everything. Sylvia stood very still. Madam Kang looked at her son with an expression that was the most human thing Sylvia had seen from her. Not soft, not apologetic, but something underneath both of those things. Something old and frightened and deeply, deeply certain about something it could not prove to anyone outside itself. "The prophecy," she began, "is yours," Minho said. "Not mine, not hers, not the child's." He turned to look at Sylvia. His eyes were, she could not describe them, full of something that did not fit in a face. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she said. "Are you sure?" "Yes." He turned back to his mother. "You will not contact the Jeon Syndicate again. You will not have Sylvia followed, monitored, discouraged, or touched in any way. You will not involve yourself in any decision that concerns her or the child." He paused. "And you will spend the rest of whatever time you feel you need deciding whether this family is something you want to be part of. Because what I am building," he looked at Sylvia again, brief and certain, "is not something that has room in it for what you did tonight." He walked to Sylvia, stood beside her. She looked up at him and he looked down at her, and neither of them said anything, and the whole terrible and extraordinary weight of the night was between them and also somehow behind them. His hand found hers. She held it. Minho looked at his mother for a long time after he finished speaking. Madam Kang did not look away. She never looked away. That was the thing about her. She had never once in her life looked away from anything, and she was not going to start now. She stood at the window with Seoul blazing behind her and looked at her son with the expression of a woman who had spent 50 years holding something together with her bare hands and was not yet ready to accept that her hands were the problem. "You have said what you came to say," she said. "I have not finished," Minho said. He stepped forward, not toward his mother, toward Sylvia. He stood beside her, directly beside her, shoulder to shoulder, close enough that she felt the warmth of him. And he looked at his mother from that position, from that side. That choice was not accidental, and Madam Kang understood it completely. "This is the last conversation we will have about this," he said, "not because I am closing a door, because there is nothing left to discuss. Sylvia is here, the child is coming. That is not a negotiation. That is not a prophecy. That is a fact." He paused. "And you will decide, not today, not this week, but you will decide whether you want to be part of what this family becomes next, or whether you want to remain dedicated to what you are afraid it might lose." Another pause. "I cannot make that decision for you, but I need you to understand that I have already made mine." Madam Kang's eyes moved to Sylvia. Sylvia held her gaze. She did not look away either. For a long moment the three of them stood in that 34th floor room with Seoul blazing outside, and 50 years of a family's history pressing down on every surface, and the specific weight of a prophecy that one woman believed completely, and another woman refused to be destroyed by. Then Madame Kang did something Sylvia had not expected. She spoke to her directly, not to Minho, to her. The prophecy says the child will either end the curse or fulfill it in blood, she said. Her voice was completely controlled. I have watched this family for 50 years. I have seen what the curse takes. I buried my husband at 51 years old. I watched my brother's family destroyed. I have spent my entire life trying to prevent the next loss. She paused. You think I am a villain in your story. I am a mother who is terrified. Sylvia looked at her for a long moment. I know, she said quietly. Madame Kang's expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. Then you understand why I did what I did, she said. No, Sylvia said. I understand why you were afraid. That is not the same thing as understanding what you did. She held the older woman's gaze. You sent men to grab me in a corridor. You fed information about me to people who wanted to use me as a weapon. You put my child, your grandchild, in danger to protect it from danger. That is not understanding I can give you. She paused. But I can tell you this. I am not the curse. This child is not the curse. And the only thing in this room right now that has the power to destroy this family is the choice you make about what happens next. The room was very still. Madame Kang looked at her son. Minho said nothing. He had said what he came to say. The rest was his mother's. Something moved across Madame Kang's face. Long and slow and deeply private. The specific movement of a woman who has built an entire architecture of belief around a fear and is feeling, for the first time, the foundations shift. She turned back to the window. Leave my floor, she said quietly. They left. In the elevator going down, Sylvia leaned against the wall and closed her eyes, and Minho stood beside her and said nothing, and the city moved past the elevator's glass panel floor by floor. She is not going to be easy, Sylvia said. No, Minho said. She is going to watch every move I make for months, maybe years. Yes. And the prophecy is not going away. She believes it completely. Yes. Sylvia opened her eyes and looked at him. But she heard me. He looked back at her. Yes, he said. She heard you. That is enough for now, Sylvia said. He reached out and tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear and looked at her face in the elevator light and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the looking did not already say better. The next 8 days were the most dangerous of her life, and also the most clarifying. Minho moved fast. Director Wu was identified and removed within 24 hours. No drama, no announcement, just an absence where a presence had been. The specific efficiency of a world that knew how to make things disappear without noise. Madame Kang stayed in the building. She did not contact the Jeon Syndicate again. Minho's line had been drawn, and she understood where it was. But she was present, moving through her floors, her eyes finding Sylvia in corridors with that seamstress assessment, measuring, calculating, sitting with the prophecy the way people sit with things they cannot put down. Sylvia let herself be watched. She went to the consultation room every morning. She worked. She sketched. She finished the overcoat with the corrected collar construction and the sister's jacket with the ease built into the bones of it. She was excellent at her work in front of everyone who was watching, and she did not once let anyone see her hands shake. On day 3, Minho came to the consultation room at noon and sat across from her without being asked, and picked up a fabric swatch and turned it in his hands, and they worked in silence for an hour. It was the best hour of the entire 8 days. The attack came on day 7, 1 day early. Sylvia was in the consultation room when the building locked down. Mr. Cho was at her door in under 30 seconds. She picked up her sketchbook without knowing why, only that leaving it behind felt wrong. And she went with him to the secured room on the 12th floor. She sat inside it with her sketchbook and her phone and listened to the building fight above her. Impact. Voices. Something heavy falling. A longer silence that was worse than all the noise. Then Minho's voice outside the door. The door opened. He was there. Dark shirt, sleeves rolled, tattoos visible, a cut above his jaw already clotting, his eyes finding her in the first half second, the way they always found her. She was across the room before she made the decision, both hands up to his jaw, fingers moving carefully along the cut. "You should have this looked at," she said. "It's minor." "I know." He held still under her hands. She felt his pulse under her fingertips. Steady, present, real. "Is it over?" she said. "Yes," he said. "The Jawn Syndicate lost their leadership tonight. Jae-won's team was at the east entrance. It was decisive." He paused. "It is over." She lowered her hands from his jaw. He caught them and held them. "It is really over," she said. Not a question, making sure. "It is really over," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, at the cut on his jaw and the tattoos on his forearms, and the man underneath all of it, who had been fighting for her in every way he knew how, since the moment she walked into his consultation room with her portfolio under her arm and her secret tucked so deep inside her, she had almost convinced herself it was just part of her body. She kissed him, right there in the secured room on the 12th floor. She kissed him and he kissed her back, and his arms came around her, and she pressed her face into his neck and felt his heartbeat. Steady, real, present, and breathed. "I've got you," he said quietly into her hair. "I know," she said. "I know you do." 3 days later, Park Jae-won called. She answered on the second ring. "It is finished," he said. "Jawn Syndicate leadership arrested and charged this morning. The case is closed." A pause. "Certain aspects of the investigation that touched the Kang family's operations have been filed with significant discretion applied." She understood what that meant. Jae-won. "It was the right thing," he said simply. "You told me to decide who I was actually trying to protect. I decided." A silence between them. The specific silence of two people who had been on opposite sides of something complicated and had ended up on the same side of something that mattered. "Are you going to be all right?" she said. "Professionally." "I closed a 3-year case," he said. "I will be fine." Another pause. "Sylvia, I need to say something." "Say it." "The first day, Dongdaemun. I was there because of the case. You were a name in a file. That is the truth." He paused. "But when those men approached you, I did not move because of the case. I want you to know that. Whatever else was complicated between us, that moment was not complicated." She was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. "I knew then." "Take care of yourself," he said. "Both of you." She understood he meant 3. She said goodbye. She sat for a long time after the call ended. In the 31st floor apartment that had become hers, her work table moved in, her fabric samples sorted by weight, her sketches pinned above the table, her Japanese denim in the corner, Mrs. O's kimchi in the refrigerator. Because Mrs. O had simply started leaving 2 portions outside Minho's building, without being asked or told the address. Because Mrs. O understood things without being told them, and always had. She sat with the quiet, with the fact that the Jawn Syndicate was finished, with the fact that Director Wu was gone, with the fact that Madame Kang was still in the building, 3 floors above her, sitting with a prophecy she believed completely, watching and waiting in the specific patient way of a woman who has learned that time is always on the side of the thing you believe in. Sylvia sat with all of it. And then she opened her sketchbook and she drew. 2 weeks after that, 17 weeks pregnant, the curve of her stomach now visible and real and present in a way that the world could see. Sylvia felt it. Not a flutter. Something more than that. Something definite and deliberate and completely unmistakable pressing against her hands from the inside. The baby moving. She put both palms flat against her stomach and felt it again. And something happened in her chest that had no name. Not joy exactly. Not relief exactly. Something larger than both of those things combined. Something that reached all the way back to a bathroom floor in Mapogu. And a mirror and a woman who said okay to the most terrifying thing she had ever faced and meant it. She thought about Lagos. About an ivory dress and fairy lights and a room with flowers in it. And the specific silence of a decision being made. She thought about a rainy night and a black car and get in. She thought about a bar with no sign on the door and it doesn't have to matter tonight and I've got you. She thought about a bathroom floor and okay. She thought about a consultation room and cream silk and a man who remembered how she took her tea. She thought about a corridor and a 34th floor and standing in the middle of a room between a man and his mother and not sitting down when she was told to. She thought about all the things she had carried alone and all the things she had put down and all the things she had chosen and all the things she was still choosing every single day. And she felt the baby move again, and she laughed. The real kind, the unguarded kind, the kind that surprised her the same way it always did. Minho appeared in the doorway. Dark shirt, sleeves rolled up, tattoos visible on his forearms in the afternoon light coming through the window. A cup of tea in each hand. No sugar in hers. Eyes finding her face the moment he cleared the door. The way they always did. Immediately. Completely. Like she was the only fixed point in whatever room he entered. He looked at her hands on her stomach. At the curve. At the laugh still on her face. He set the tea down on the table without looking at it and crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair. So their faces were level and put both his hands over hers where they rested on her stomach. They waited. It moved again. She watched his face. She would keep that for the rest of her life. The expression on Kang Minho's face when he felt his child move for the first time. The man who ran a criminal empire and managed things without official names, and had never in his life been undone by anything. Completely. Quietly. Entirely undone by something the size of his palm moving under his hands. His jaw tightened. His eyes filled. He did not manage it. He did not try. He pressed his forehead against her stomach, and she put both hands in his hair. And outside the window, Seoul did what it always did. Enormous and indifferent and relentlessly alive. And inside the 31st floor apartment of the Kang building, everything that had been in motion for 14 months, across 2 continents and 12,000 kilometers, and one rainy night in Itaewon finally arrived somewhere. Not where either of them had planned. Somewhere better. Somewhere honest. Somewhere real. After a long moment, he lifted his head and looked at her, and she looked at him, and there was nothing left to say that needed saying because everything that mattered had already been said. In a bar with no sign on the door and a corridor with a crater. In the wall and a 32nd floor office and a 34th floor room and every quiet moment in between. She touched the healed cut on his jaw. He turned his face and pressed his lips to her palm. "Minho," she said. "Yes. We are going to be okay." He looked at her. The real look. The one underneath everything. The one that lived below the controlled authority and the dangerous stillness and all the things without official names. "Yes," he said. Simply. Finally. Like a door closing on every version of the story where they were not. She leaned forward and kissed him softly, and he kissed her back. And outside the window, the city of Seoul blazed and turned, and Sylvia Okoro, 26 years old, 12,000 kilometers from Lagos, 17 weeks pregnant, completely and entirely and deliberately here, smiled against his mouth and chose this. One more time. The way she was going to keep choosing it. Every single day. For the rest of her life. Wherever you are watching this right now, take one breath before you scroll. Because you just traveled 12,000 kilometers with her. You watched her walk out of a room in Lagos in an ivory dress with her spine perfectly straight, and her face completely composed, and her heart in pieces on the floor behind her, and not one single tear on her face, because she had been trained not to cry. And she walked anyway. You watched her land in a city that did not know her name with 2 suitcases and a broken engagement, and build something in it anyway, street by street, sketch by sketch, cup of tea by cup of tea, with her own hands. You watched her sit on a bathroom floor at 8 in the morning, in a foreign country with 4 pregnancy tests beside her, and the most enormous quiet she had ever felt settling over her. And she said one word to the mirror. Okay. Not fine. Not it will all work out. Not I have a plan. Just okay. And that okay carried her through 3 months of carrying something alone that most people would have collapsed under. It carried her through a corridor attack and a 34th floor, and a woman with a prophecy and a man with a manipulation, and a city with a war happening in it. It carried her all the way here. To a 31st floor apartment with her work table moved in, and her fabric samples sorted by weight, and a man crouched in front of her chair with both hands over hers, feeling his child move for the first time with his eyes full, and his face completely open, and everything managed finally put down. She did not get a perfect story. She got a real one. And sometimes, after everything, real is the most extraordinary thing there is. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see every single place this story traveled today. Lagos, Seoul, London, Accra, New York, Toronto, Nairobi, Dubai. Wherever this found you, drop it below. Share this with someone who is in the middle of their own version of this journey. Someone who is carrying something alone that is too heavy. Someone who is standing in front of a mirror saying okay to something that terrifies them. Someone who needs to be reminded that you do not have to have it all figured out before you choose forward. You just have to choose. And subscribe. Because every single week we come back here and we tell stories about women who do exactly that. Women who walk out of rooms that were killing them slowly. Women who land in foreign cities and build something anyway. Women who sit on bathroom floors and say, okay, and mean it, and get up, and keep going. Sylvia did, and so can you.